South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Lindiwe Sisulu has opened the second formal meeting of BRICS foreign ministers in Pretoria. The meeting of the foreign ministers is in preparation for the 10th annual summit, which takes place at the end of July. Angelo Coppola has more on the official opening of the meeting.
Many of the ministers and their delegations arrived over the weekend and met with their BRICS counterparts and the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at a reception on Sunday evening. The ministers are expected to discuss practical cooperation amongst the BRICS countries. We understand that the current international political situation will also be explored. According to officials, the delegations will also look at the role of BRICS states in implementing the UN's Agenda 2030. The meeting comes at an interesting time internationally.
We meet in the face of multilateralism under siege, when the integrity of international agreements can be easily and hastily, expeditiously compromised, when more and more countries take an inward-looking position at the expense of others.
Each of the heads of delegations highlighted issues facing the group of countries, with India talking about cybersecurity and counterterrorism and the need for the creation of a BRICS Security Forum when the BRICS leaders meet in Johannesburg in July. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Tshwane, South Africa.
For more on this, Zheng Yibing joins us live from Beijing. As the BRICS foreign minister converge in South Africa, what are China's priorities at the group meeting?
Well, yes, indeed. The meetings of the BRICS ministers foreign affairs in South Africa is an important event. It aims to lay the groundwork with joint efforts from all participants for the Johannesburg Summit in July. That will also be China's priority during the group meeting. Last year, the BRICS Summit was praised by participants as a success and ushered in a second golden decade for BRICS cooperation. For this year's meeting, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said earlier that China will make all-out efforts to support and coordinate with South Africa in ensuring the success of the 10th BRICS Summit to be held in Johannesburg in July. And China will talk about President Xi Jinping's attendance at the BRICS Johannesburg Summit and also President Ramaphosa's attendance at the 2018 Beijing Summit of the Foreign and China-Africa Cooperation. And one thing particularly noted, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and South Africa. It will also be important for China to boost bilateral ties during the meeting. Back to you.
Now, China's trade dispute with the US is likely to feature at the meeting. Is it likely that the BRICS bloc will be a trade fallback plan for China, and what support is Beijing expecting to get from the bloc?
Well, all the information we have got so far is Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to meet his counterparts from other BRICS states on practical cooperation among them, and the current international political situation, as well as the role of BRICS in the implementation of the UN's Agenda 2030. And some analysts say that discussion on China's trade dispute with the US could appear during the meeting, but the meeting's topic is still on how to have an in-depth exchange of views on BRICS practical cooperations. And China's stance towards the trade dispute with the US could be seen on a statement released after their third round of trade talks in Beijing on Sunday. While the statement says the world's second largest economy plans to increase imports from the US and the rest of the world to meet domestic demand and support high-quality development. However, it says that all the economic and trade achievements negotiated by the two parties will not take effect if the US still goes ahead and introduces tariffs. Back to you.
All right, that's Zheng Yibing live for us there in Beijing. Many thanks. Now, for an African perspective on the upcoming BRICS Summit, Dr. David Munyai, the co-director, University of Johannesburg Confucius Institute, joins me from Johannesburg. Dr. Munyai, BRICS Summit takes place at a time there is anxiety of a possible trade war between the US and its traditional trade partners. How is this likely to affect the bloc?
It is indeed unfortunate that the BRICS summit would take place at a time that the world is on the verge of a crisis, a trade war. And I think this year around, the BRICS country will reaffirm their move towards embracing globalization and anti-protectionism. I think those are core issues that working, ensuring that everyone develops within a globalizing world in fair trade, which is required, and also dealing with quite a number of issues, particularly the negative impact of globalization. I think these are core issues, and as you are aware, Africa is at the receiving end in terms of being an underdeveloped continent. And I think this will be the time in which African leaders, working with other emerging countries, economies, to push forward for reforms that are required within the global system, that the post-1945 world order cannot continue in the manner in which it is at the moment, with only few developed Western countries dominating the system.
Now, apart from China, most of the bloc members' economies have been facing economic headwinds. This year marks its 10th anniversary. Will there be much to celebrate?
There's quite a number of things to be proud of and to celebrate in terms of unity among the emerging countries, streamlining and having clear an agenda in terms of changes that are required. I think what are critical here, the need for industrialization, particularly for the African continent, in line with Agenda 2063, and a massive need for infrastructure development and dealing with unemployment. I think those are core areas in which the developing countries need to discuss in Johannesburg or during the BRICS Summit, and going far beyond the state-centric understanding of BRICS and ensuring that the civil society, business, particularly universities within BRICS countries, cooperate at a much more integrated way and ensure that they achieve some of these critical goals in line with SDGs.
And looking ahead, there are indications that the bloc will expand and accommodate African countries. How best can the continent tap on its potential, especially in its quest for an industrial revolution?
Industrial revolution as we move into the new high tech, and there are quite a number of lessons that the Africa and other emerging economies, particularly India, Brazil, as well as Russia, can learn from China. And cooperation between these countries and going beyond just the BRIC countries, including other developing countries, to ensure that with this bulk of youth, particularly on the African continent, to ensure that there is relevant cooperation, knowledge transfer in taking advantage of the gains that are being made, particularly in China. And therefore, I think the BRICS Summit will deal with this, plus more. I think for Africa is not just the fourth industrial revolution, it's also issues of dealing with peace and security, where South Africa with the African continent will assert the need for contribution from BRICS countries to pour in more troops on the ground and assist the continent to deal with silencing of the guns on the ground to ensure that effective industrialization and fourth industrial revolution could take place.
Right, Dr. Munyaye, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us, Dr. David Munyaye in Johannesburg.